So, welcome, Sarit. Thank you so much for being a part of my podcast here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's so interesting the work that you do. I'm curious about the Alma Center that you actually founded and that you're leading on a daily basis. Could you tell us a little bit about the Alma Center?
Yes, maybe I should start a little bit from myself because that's like to talk about my motivation. I served in the IDF as an intelligence officer, and I witnessed the lack of knowledge and ignorance in international community about Israel's security challenges up north. I live 9 kilometers from the Lebanese border, and I especially witnessed that when I served in the IDF, and I was an officer in the headquarters in Tel Aviv during the previous war in 2006. And when I moved to the Northern Command and I actively participated in defending my home and my family, I also witnessed the lack of knowledge in the world around us. And when I ended my service a decade ago, I knew that this is what I want to do. I want to brief people or provide people from outside of Israel with accessible and relevant knowledge about the security challenges from Syria and Lebanon. Of course, I didn't imagine that it will become an institution. It was a gradual development from a one woman show that stood on the mountain with a bunch of maps. I was lucky enough to get support from people that met me and believed in the idea and in the dream. So Alma Center today provides research and education on this topic. We gather the information from Arabic media mainly, or Arabic social media. But what happened along the way is, since some of us, not all of us, by the way, but some of us are veterans of the intelligence here in Israel. So we use the methodology, which is not academy, and it's not exactly journalism. We cross the information, which usually it's really difficult to cross information in this world, but we cross the information not only comparing text, but also comparing text to terrain, for example. And also by the fact that we are here. I don't need to read in the newspaper that there was an Israeli attack on the border, or that there was, I don't know, something happening, or infiltration or rocket attack. I experienced all of that. I see it from my balcony. I ran to the bomb shelter. So the combination between the personal experience and the fact that we all live here, and the research and professional research that we bring and analysis that we bring, this is what Alma Center all about. Without, by the way, any support from any government or any political party, it was very important for me to establish an independent institution. And I'm very happy that it is working. And today, we are familiar all over the globe. The information we provide is being read everywhere, from Europe to Asia to United States. Policy and opinion makers are using the information, responding to our newsletter, to our social media platforms, etc. So I'm very proud.
That's very interesting to hear. And I think it's important what you're touching upon, the information about what's going on in Israel, because I think that Israel is very focused on defending itself on 7 different fronts at the same time and winning the actual war that it is fighting. But at the same time, Israel also needs to fight in the media war, because I feel like, especially for my country, I live in Norway, where we have a media that is just demonizing Israel all the time. So I feel like the information about what it's actually like on the ground for Israel to communicate that out is so important in this day and age.
Yeah, and I would even say further, there is so much information on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and so little about what's happening, the threats that are coming from Syria and Lebanon. And I met journalists and groups that came to the door here, even not knowing that we are at war here since October 8, 2023. And so for me, it was very important to talk about it, and also, by the way, journalists and reporters are not always reporting that the editors are ignoring what's happening here. unfortunately. And that's why for me it was very important to create a direct channel to people that to provide them this kind of information.
What is also interesting or important, I should say, to mention is that something that almost no Western media that I can see is touching upon is that a lot of Israelis from the north are displaced. We're talking several tens of thousands who have lost their homes because of the situation. How many people is it in Israel that is displaced, and what's the situation for them now?
So in the past few weeks, we witnessed a change because what happened is that people just packed their suitcases and left in those places next to the border. And afterwards came the order from the government to evacuate with compensation and everything. We ended up that we had 43 communities. The biggest one is 23,000 people. Probably around 60,000 Israelis that received compensation from the government for the evacuation, 0 to 5 kilometers from the border. I can tell you there were many more that left and came back very quickly after a few weeks from communities that didn't get any compensation, like my community, because it's within the range of 5 to 10, for example. And people like me in those areas of the 5 to 10 kilometers from the Lebanese border experienced the war, the sirens, the rockets. And we also have those who evacuated from the communities next to the border came to our communities. So not only they left their houses and they were evacuated, but also they experienced the rockets and the sirens. This was the situation until November. Since November, there is a ceasefire, and we'll talk what is exactly a ceasefire in the Middle East, but in general, a ceasefire here, and the situation is better and we are getting back to life. And since the beginning of March, the school year was reopened in the evacuated communities and people started to come back. It changes from a community to community, the percentage of those who came back. There are communities that are still mostly empty, and there are few communities that are mostly, most people came back. So the percentage, if you take the overall percentage, is about 50% of the evacuees that came back to their communities. It will take a little bit more time for people to feel secure, to trust that truly the Israeli policy is different than it used to be before October 7th, and that we are not enabling the monster to grow. And at the same time, there is still the school year, so young families don't want to transfer the children again after they truly moved so many apartments in the past year and a half, and they want to end the school year and only come back in the summer.
Yeah. At the worst point, how many Israelis were displaced at the same time? Was it like 60 or 70,000 or something
more.
Like that?
At the beginning, it was more because many people left, as I've said, also communities which the government didn't compensate. And we were very much afraid of the invasion, an option of invasion of Hezbollah. We saw them on the border. We know they were prepared. And at the first few weeks, the Iranians threatened that if Israel will enter Gaza, so Hezbollah will invade from the north. So we were really worried. I evacuated my kids at the first few weeks, and afterwards they insisted on coming back. So it was a lot of movement during the war around that. So that's why when I'm talking about numbers, I prefer to talk about those who are being compensated, but there was a lot of movement in this.
So people were worried about a similar kind of style of attack as the 7th of October, also in the north?
Yeah, completely. And I can explain why. First, Hezbollah talked about it openly, published a lot of videos of its capabilities, speeches of its leadership. Those who live on the border didn't need all of that because we saw them. We saw them on the other side of the border again and again and again. We saw them building the watching towers. I personally, they took photos of me. I took photos of them. I saw many evidence that Hezbollah was there and prepared. And as I've said, also with the zoom out to Iran, also the Iranians spoke about it. And the feeling was during the past year, just before the war, that Hezbollah is prepared and willing to go to war with Israel. We wrote about it on summer 23, and actually since summer 2022 in Alma Center. This was our evaluation. Unfortunately, our mission is not to look south. We didn't look south, so we didn't see the connection to Hamas. But when you examine the information, you see that it was all planned together. They were a sequence of meetings between Hamas and the PIJ and the Iranians and Hezbollah to coordinate the campaign. Not everything went as they planned, probably, but there was a plan. I can tell you that the first few weeks, I slept, with the shoes next to the bed and the socks in the shoes, and I was fully prepared to just run away, get into the car, and get out. We were really, really worried. 10 years ago, Hezbollah published a propaganda video that described the offensive plan to occupy the Galilee. Back then, we all considered it as propaganda, lie, fake propaganda. And eventually, it gained the capability to launch this kind of attack with experienced elite unit that fought in Syria, and back then won against the rebels of Syria. And then they came back and they redeployed on the border with Israel. So we knew this could come. The video, when I forgot all about it, and I opened it again when Hezbollah started to launch rockets in October 8th. So the war here started in October 8th, 2023. I opened the video again and I saw that it was similar to what Hamas had done in the south. It was step by step, exactly the same military plan, to start with barrage of rockets and then to launch the forces, the ground forces, to the communities. It was stressed that they are going to the communities. It was stressed that the part of the mission is to take hostages. It was stressed that they are going to block the main roads to prevent any help from coming, that they are going to do that from various areas along the borderline. And this was published 10 years ago. And all they did in the past 10 years was to prepare to this scenario.
Also, I remember seeing the pictures from the UN watchtowers that was just like 10 meters away from the Hezbollah tunnels, and just pretending that they haven't seen it. Or what's your comment to that kind of thing?
Well, this is one of the most frustrating points for me, because during the years I was, like, I can say, the last Israeli advocate to UNIFIL. I always said that the problem is with the mandate, that the mandate is not accurate enough and not decisive enough, because UNIFIL told us that they cannot, due to their mandate, they cannot enter to private territories. And Hezbollah hides the weapons in the towns, in the houses. Today, by the way, I had a soldier at my office, an ex-soldier at my office that participated in the current campaign, and he told the group that I hosted here that they entered into South Lebanon, and in every house they found rockets in the kids' room, the children's room.
Wow.
So, okay, UNIFIL didn't enter to those places, but what was exposed in the current war is that Hezbollah hide its rockets not only in the children's room. In the children's room, it's the warehouse, but the launcher to launch the rockets, or the small hidden places between the trees, that where they put the helmets and the guns and the vests and the bags to actually carry out the invasion, are places which are very close to the fence, and they are all open areas between the trees, nature, that there was no reason due to the UNIFIL mandate to enter to those areas, and UNIFIL didn't do it. You mentioned an underground infrastructures. This is exactly the way they did it. They hidden all these equipment in those underground infrastructures, and UNIFIL did nothing. Just to make people understand, northern Israel is not like Gaza, where we speak about the type of the terrain. So it is made of rocks. To excavate a small underground infrastructure or a tunnel, it takes a long time. It's not something that you can do overnight. It takes a long time. It creates a lot of noise because you basically excavate in rocks. You need to evacuate the dirt. Where was UNIFIL following all of that? I don't know. The second thing that actually completely diminished my any trust or any understanding that I used to have to UNIFIL or to the UN was that during the battles, they deliberately disturbed us. So we came to disarm Hezbollah while UNIFIL hadn't done that, and they disturbed us. And I want to explain that. I always said that Hezbollah is intimidating UNIFIL, and that I totally understand that UNIFIL is not willing to risk his life for me. And we had tons of videos and visual materials of Hezbollah military operatives in the past 18 years attacking UNIFIL with stones, burning the vehicles, beating them, taking their cameras, etc. Fine, I understand. But then when IDF entered Lebanon, and by the way, IDF only maneuvered in the areas which are few kilometers from the border, that's it. IDF asked UNIFIL to evacuate the positions which are in this area, and UNIFIL refused. So they risked their lives to refused, and this caused a lot of disturbances in the capability of the IDF to work freely against Hezbollah, since Hezbollah was using the positions of UNIFIL as human shield. It launched rockets from next to these positions. As you said, they had the tunnels next to these positions. And we had film incidents that a UNIFIL truck or UN truck is just passing by in the middle of a battle. Now, at that moment, it's the IDF get the order to cease fire. So they cease fire. The Hezbollah terrorists ran away. We lost them. What are you doing here? Oh, no, we just want to bring humanitarian aid to this or that area, where most the civilians on the Lebanese side also fled their villages because of the war. So I don't understand anymore the policy of the UN with regard to Hezbollah and the arrangement in South Lebanon. I think they can go back. It's just a waste of money and
Yeah.
time.
At one point, I heard that Hezbollah had around like 100 or 150,000 missiles and rockets pointed towards Israel. Now, Israel since then have led a bunch of bombing campaigns to reduce that amount, I think like half or so. But that still is like 75,000 rockets or so. Can you explain a little bit about the security situation right now for Israel in regards to all of these missiles and rockets pointing at Israel?
So first, I want to say that the threat against Israel was divided to actually two threats. First, it was the invasion with Radwan Brigade, 6 brigades. And second is the rocket arsenal that you mentioned. So with regard to Radwan brigades and the capability to invade, this doesn't exist anymore. We killed most of the commanders. And we revealed most of the weapons that was next to the border. This was the main goal of the ground maneuver of the IDF there. Two terrorists can always cross any fence, okay? But we are not talking about this kind of stuff. The arsenal of rockets and missiles was degraded. I only have to believe my government. They are talking about 80%. 80% that was degraded. I cannot conclude numbers, but we can say that they have at least a few thousand more, 20,000, 30,000, I don't know. Comparing to what they used to have, the situation is much better. We probably degraded most of the arsenal that can get to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or areas which are farther from Israel's north. And we probably degraded the arsenal, which is accurate, like long range and accurate. But at the same time, until the last day of the war, until the ceasefire, Hezbollah was capable, and it did launch between 100 to 200 rockets every day. So I believe that if the fighting will be renewed, even though I don't believe it will be renewed, but if I will be surprised and it will be renewed, they are still capable of doing that, of launching around 100 rockets every day, for at least for a while.
I was just in Israel, like 2 weeks ago, and I visited this Druze village up in the north, where we were standing like just a couple of kilometers from the border towards Lebanon, and where Hezbollah had a stronghold. So I was there and saw the where the bombs have struck and the buildings that were destroyed and all the bullet holes and lots of remnants of fighting, making it more real to just see it up close for myself, and how close this border also is, and how exposed like these villages are for Hezbollah just making an attack on Israel. And I feel like it's important to talk about these things, and especially now in this day and age where Israel has to fight for its existence, and then that people understand the kind of context that Israel is actually in, and the situation that you are attacked on so many fronts at the same time is kind of unprecedented to be able to handle. And what do you think Hezbollah is? Do you think that it is one of the arms of Iran, or is it self generating kind of organism that runs itself, or does it takes its orders directly from Iran and does Iran's will upon Israel?
Two things here. First, it is definitely a Lebanese organization. Okay, Hezbollah didn't take over Lebanon or didn't take over the Muslim Shiites of Lebanon. It's not an external force or whatever. It is a Lebanese, genuine Lebanese organization. Yet, as a genuine Lebanese organization, it is completely loyal to the ideology of the Ayatollahs of Iran to spread the Islamic Revolution values, meaning the loyalty to the supreme leader of Iran and the resistance to any Western values of, women's rights, gays' rights, democracy, freedom, all of that. That's who Hezbollah is. What happened during this war is that if Hezbollah used to have a leader named Nasrallah that was almost at the degree of a partner to the Iranians, almost, because he was the most senior. He led the most senior militia of the proxy militia of Iran in the Middle East, which is Hezbollah, and he was very charismatic and very smart. He was killed by Israel during this war. And since then, what we saw is the Iranians are becoming more involved, not less involved, more involved. We've seen this. I can give you just two small examples, okay? One, on the ground, we suddenly see Iranian Red Crescent in South Lebanon coming to examine the damages. Why Iranian Red Crescent coming to examine the damages? It's because it's actually not Red Crescent, it's IRGC, and we've seen this in the past, that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard are using the cover of the Red Crescent in order to put boots on the ground and to operate. That's one example. The second example is the issue of the money, follow the money, right? And if Hezbollah wants to recover, it needs money. If it wants to recover, it needs to finance the recovery of the houses where they hid the rockets. Okay, they need to give compensation for their own base. They published a few months ago that they cannot give the compensation now. Please wait before you go to our banks and take the money. Okay. Then they made a huge funeral to this leader, to the charismatic leader Nasrallah that was killed. A huge funeral, like 3 months or 4 months after he was killed. And into this funeral came Iranian diplomats to participate. And they came with suitcases of money. And a week later, Hezbollah published that, okay, now you can go to the banks and get your money for compensation because they got the money. Otherwise, it is becoming very difficult for them to get the money into Lebanon. They are now trying to do it through Turkey or with these diplomatic flights. It's the Iranian involvement is something that it's the oxygen for Hezbollah. They cannot live without it, but more than an oxygen, it's the essence. There is no justification for the existence of Hezbollah without the ideology it believes in.
I understand. And what do you think about Iran's hate towards Israel? You know, in Tehran, as you know, they have this doomsday watch on the square there that's counting down until the day that Israel is wiped off the map. Totally absurd. But what do you think that type of hate? What is it about? Is it just pure anti-Semitism? Is it religious? What is it in your opinion, that kind of hate towards Israel?
No, it's not exactly Jewish. It's two things, I would put it this way. First, Yes, it is religiously motivated because that's the government of Iran. It's a radical religious ideology that took over the country in 1979. And since they run the country this way or another, including developing proxies, militia proxies in the Middle East. Due to their belief, Israel is the small devil and United States is the big devil. That's one thing. As I've said, it's all against Western values. Israel is perceived as the Western representative or Western presence in the Middle East. And that's why they want to get rid of this foreign entity in the Middle East that took over Palestine. Palestinians are a good excuse, but the Iranians couldn't care less about the Palestinians or the Gazians or even the Lebanese. Okay, they want to get Israel out. They want to get Israel out, and that way they will get rid of American or Western influence. That's one thing. Now let's talk about Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the third holiest city to Islam. The third, not the first. The first two are in Saudi Arabia. So for Iran to deal with Saudi Arabia, we need to go through Jerusalem. It's on the way. And that's why it became, and also it's a very good mobilizer to talk about Jerusalem. So that's why they had all the interest in the world to campaign for Jerusalem. It's not for Palestinians, it's for Jerusalem. It's to liberate Jerusalem from the filthy presence of Jews over there. That's the point of view. And when I'm saying that, it's not spoken only in Persian, it is spoken in Arabic as well in many places of the Middle East. Now, if you look at the chanting, the slogans of the Houthis of Yemen, which are proxies of Iran, and inside Iran itself, like from the crowd during speeches of Iranian generals, or in the funeral that I've mentioned of Nasrallah, the crowd is chanting death to Israel, death to America. And the Houthis of Yemen, their badges are saying death to Israel, death to America, a curse upon the Jews. So basically, it's a combination of everything you suggested altogether.
Because I was going to ask you about that. Considering Lebanon, how much do we have any data on that, statistics? How much, or any a general feel, or how much does the civil population in itself actually support Hezbollah and their fight against Israel, and how many actually oppose Hezbollah and wants peace with Israel?
Okay, it's two questions: how many want peace with Israel and how many oppose Hezbollah? So I'll start with the first one. In order to answer it, you need to understand the society of Lebanon. And the Lebanese society is very diverse. It means that you have the base of Hezbollah, which is mainly the Muslim Shiites of Lebanon. That's about half of the Lebanese population, 2 million people. Or I should say Lebanese citizens, because in Lebanon you also have Syrian refugees between 1 million to 2 million. Nobody knows, but they are not citizens. And you have less than 200,000 what is considered to be Palestinian refugees. And I'm saying considered because it's fourth generation. Nobody is being a refugee in fourth generation except for Palestinians. But they still in refugee camps, and they still they don't have any human rights or freedom or anything in Lebanon, unfortunately. Bottom line, about 2 million Lebanese are part of this Muslim Shiite base. Most of them are supporters of Hezbollah. Some of them are supporters of another Muslim Shiite party in Lebanon named Amal. Amal and Hezbollah used to be competitive, like rivals in politics of Lebanon. Today, they're not rivals. Today, they are running together in election, and they call themselves the Shiite couple. It may change tomorrow, but that's the situation today. And Hezbollah is trying to, kind of a bear hug to Amal, and to make Amal connect, the Amal meet connect also to Iran. There are a lot of opponents to Hezbollah in Lebanon itself, but it doesn't mean that they want normalization with Israel. Just to give you an example from the past week, there was a very unusual expression by a parliament member in Lebanon, who is actually Muslim Sunni, that supported the normalization with Israel, which is very, very unusual to hear that, okay, from somebody who is a leader, politician. And he received wide responses from people that are not necessarily the natural supporters of Hezbollah against that. Films that are made in Hollywood, that you have Israeli actress like Gal Gadot, are not broadcast in Lebanon. There is a huge debate there around that, like Wonder Woman. Israel is completely banned. If a Lebanese is meeting an Israeli and this is known in Lebanon, he is considered a complete traitor. And I'm saying that, I'm a little bit hesitating, and I'm saying that so sadly, because my origins are from those places, and I wish it would be different, and I wish we can have normalization with Lebanon. For Israelis, there is no reason. If Hezbollah is not there and is not threatening us, there is no reason why not.
I understand, because I'm reading a book right now about Iran and how everything changed in 1979 and how it was made illegal to vote anything else but for the Ayatollah, right? And that they had like elections, but they weren't elections, but they were stamped in their passports whether or not they had gone to vote and voted for the right Ayatollah. So that goes further to my question is, how much can you trust like the statistics and the research on how many actually support or doesn't support? Like, are people scared to say their opinions if they actually want to support Israel or have peace with Israel, or are they scared to say that? Is that dangerous to say in Lebanon, to demonstrate, to say that you actually have a different view?
First, yes, I want to say a few things to put in proportions. Lebanon is not Gaza. Okay, if you express views against Hezbollah, you're not going immediately to get killed. There is openly criticism against Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's not a regular dictatorship in this sense. Okay, even though we can challenge the word democracy when we speak about Lebanon, but it's also, I cannot say it's a dictatorship by any means. If you cross the line, there is like an unimaginable line of criticism that if you cross it, you do endanger your life. And there were criticizers of Lebanon that in the past few years even were killed by Hezbollah, criticizers of Hezbollah, criticizers of how Hezbollah is making things complicated from Lebanon, or making it involved in wars that are not Lebanese wars. And yes, Hezbollah killed some of them, but they crossed some kind of unimaginable line of criticism, like humiliation of Hezbollah in the media. And I'm not trying to justify it, of course. I think it should be completely freedom of expression. I'm just trying to put things in proportion. Unfortunately, I don't believe that most of the Muslim Shiite base that supports Hezbollah is interested in normalization with Israel or is truly against Hezbollah. And I will explain why. Mm-hmm. Because Hezbollah, as I've said, it's not an external organization that took over this society. It is part of this society, and it invested a lot of resources to gain the support of this society by creating dependency of this society in Hezbollah. So Hezbollah is not just a military operation or a military system. It's also a civilian system. Most of it is a civilian system that educates the children, that bring medical aid and support and buy them food in the holidays and give them a sports context and women's organizations and students' organizations and banks, as I've mentioned, and energy. When there was a crisis of energy in Lebanon, Hezbollah came in and provided the oil for its own people, or the gas. All of this create an alternative government for the people for the base of Hezbollah. So the base of Hezbollah expect Hezbollah to provide for it because this is what they had done in the past 40 years. They don't have any alternative in this respect. And when this is the situation, people are indoctrinated to support the ideology of Hezbollah, genuinely support. There are voices, even among the Muslim Shiites, against Hezbollah, but there are very few. As for the normalization in Israel, those voices are from all different sects, like Muslims, Sunnis, and Christians, and whatever. Those voices are rare. I cannot, get to people's state of minds, but those voices are rare. And again, there is no education in Lebanon for coexistence with Israel, for any acceptance of the existence of the state of Israel. Like I can tell you, a few years ago, we saw an incident that a teacher in South Lebanon wanted to teach the geography. And she taught the children who are the neighboring countries to Lebanon. And she said that in the South, it's Israel. Like, obvious, right? And she was fired because she didn't say Palestine. She said Israel.
Wow. In that sense, also, would you say that Hezbollah is actually quite similar to Hamas as an organization in that it is both like a civilian system and a military system and a terror organization, like everything all at once?
Yeah, but first, I just want to add something to the previous question. I don't want that what will come up of this interview is that as an Israeli, I don't believe in peace. Israelis who don't believe in peace cannot live in Israel. Okay, that's as simple as that. Eventually, we must have a little bit of hope and a little bit of faith.
Yeah.
I never lost hope that I will be able to go to Beirut and see where my grandmother grew up and where my grandparents are buried in the Jewish synagogue of Beirut. I wish I could go there. And unfortunately, I don't see enough signs of any willing by the Lebanese government to do that. And again, even this week, we saw a visit of the American envoy to Lebanon, and she tried to discuss normalization. And there were voices inside Lebanon that said, okay, we can discuss an arrangement with Israel, but we're not going to discuss normalization. And that's very sad. Like, I cannot get into the people's mind, but eventually that's the politics of Lebanon. This is how it is working today. What was your question? I'm sorry.
The question was because you were describing how Hezbollah is both a civilian system and a military system. So I'm asking if that's quite similar to Hamas, the organization of it.
Yes, even though they are very different organizations in the sense that Hamas is a Sunni Muslim and Hezbollah is a Shiite Muslim.
Yeah.
In this respect, they are both relying on 100 years idea of Hassan al-Banna from the Muslim Brotherhood that spoke about dawah. The idea of the dawah is that you provide the people everything they need, and they provide you with support and loyalty, if you like. That's
kind
very
of like
simple.
A mafia organization.
Yes, just add the ideology. Imagine that the child who is growing up is being fed by the mafia is also taught at school that the head of the mafia is the prophet.
Yes.
Okay, if you like.
A brainwashing at the same time.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference from crime or mafia, or it's a strong ideology behind it with Hamas and Hezbollah. For Israelis, to differ between the simple Gazian and Hamas is very, very challenging. Because when we saw the kids in Gaza spitting on the dead bodies of our women that were kidnapped after they were raped into Gaza, there is no logical way I can explain this.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult and probably similar to like in Lebanon, right? That Hezbollah actually has a lot of support. That in the same sense in Gaza, Hamas actually has a lot of support.
Yes, but as I've said, it's different in respect that in Gaza there is no alternative. There is no political alternative. Maybe there are people that hate Hamas in Gaza, but they don't have any political power. Okay, in Lebanon there is a political alternative, so we have a little bit more hope with regard to Lebanon than in Gaza. In Gaza, the only hope that I have is when I look at what the IDF, like if Israel will prevent Hamas from taking over Gaza again. Okay, so there is much hope there because everything is destroyed. In this respect, you can rebuild differently. But in Lebanon, not everything is destroyed, but at the same time, you have opponents to Hezbollah. You have those who are against Hezbollah that, as you see, the Americans are working with them. And that's why I have a little bit of hope that now it's a golden opportunity to truly bring a change, to create a different reality, actually not only for Israelis, but for the Lebanese as well. That, okay, it's time to get rid of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is much weaker. Those who are against Hezbollah can be much stronger. And maybe now is the time to do things differently. I'm sorry, but we don't see enough signs of that yet. But I think now is the opportunity, and I hope that the Lebanese will not miss.
Lately, we have seen a few people who are brave enough to actually demonstrate on Gaza against Hamas. What do you think about those demonstrators?
I wish them good luck. Fortunately, Hamas is killing everybody who is against it. We had one story at least of one of these demonstrators that Hamas caught him, killed him, and throw his brutalized body at the doorstep of his parents to tell them, okay, if anybody, to show everybody. They are filming the executions to frighten everybody else.
But I think it's interesting for the world to see that the few who are actually brave enough to demonstrate on Gaza, they demonstrate not against Israel or the IDF, they demonstrate against Hamas.
Why is it awkward? That's obvious.
Yeah, but like here in Norway, where I'm sitting, where I'm living, everybody's demonizing Israel for what Israel is doing towards the Palestinians and people in Gaza. And then I tell them, but hey, the few who actually demonstrate there, they don't demonstrate against Israel. They demonstrate against Hamas.
Look, Israel avoided from fighting against Hezbollah and against Hamas. Our fightings against Hamas in the past decade were very, very limited and actually enabled by not fighting or not fighting enough, two monsters to grow, in a sense that they endangered our very existence and life on those borders. We refrained from fighting them because we were afraid exactly from this scenario, that if we will fight them all the way, we will be blamed for that because they are using their own people as human shields, hiding the weapons inside the houses, knowing that way people get killed. By the way, I must tell you that even with saying people will get killed, nobody knows the numbers of how many were killed in Gaza. And everybody is quoting Hamas numbers. We should understand that Hamas prepared to this PR campaign, and it is invested in this PR campaign to win against Israel in the international arena. But it's a terrorist organization that has no problem to lie about numbers and about anything else, by the way. So here are some doubts that people should have with regard to the numbers. First, terrorists are not dying in this war. It's only women and children. Who is women and children? 17-year-old Hamas military operative that launched rockets against Israel is a terrorist, even though he's 17 years old. He's killing Israelis. He wants to kill Israelis. That's one thing. So when people are saying different kind of numbers, they should ask how many among them are actually terrorists? The second question is, how many died of Israeli fire? And how many died of Hamas fallen rockets in Gaza? Natural death, died because, many reasons could be for that. Because of secondary blasts, like when you blow up a weapon depot inside a town, there are secondary blasts of those rockets and people get hit. This is where they hid those rockets. How many died because Israel asked them to evacuate and they didn't evacuate? I don't ignore the fact that civilians were killed because there was an Israeli attack. It happens. But in general, Israel has no interest to kill innocent Gazians because we know that we will be denounced around the globe. So why would we do that? We want to kill terrorists. That's the mission. That's the overall mission, to win against Hamas. Killing civilians is disturbing the mission that we want to gain. So we have no interest in doing that. Hamas knows that, and Hamas used his own people as human shield. We avoided attacking Hamas, and eventually we ended up in October 7th, which is, the trauma is, I don't have enough words to talk about it, but we are 9 million Israelis that are in trauma.
The situation in Syria, what is the situation there? Because I see pictures and videos of these terrorists slaughtering the Alawites and or Alawites and Christians and the turmoil that's going on there politically as well. What's the situation there, and how will it affect Israel's security, you think?
It's funny. In the past 15 years, 500,000 people were killed in Syria. And all of a sudden, while we don't know how many were killed, there are evidence of 1,000 and evidence of 6,000. But now you wake up. Where have you been in the past 15 years, world? Well, people were gassed in Syria by the butcher from Damascus. Where have you been when half of the population of Syria was displaced and 11 million people became refugees and lost their houses or displaced inside Syria? Where have you been? Where are all these people? How come now everybody is giving the attention to Syria? This was supposed to be long ago. And we've been talking about that long ago. And we published the information long ago. It was published. The world cannot say that it didn't know. It was published. 500,000 people were killed in this civil war. And truly sad. What happened is that after Israel won against Hezbollah, I'll put it this way, okay? And Hezbollah became much weaker. It actually won against as I've said, the most senior militia of Iran. That the rebels of Syria lost against it in 2018. What am I saying? I'm talking about Hezbollah is Lebanese. Yes, I'm talking about Hezbollah is Lebanese, but it came to help the Syrian government back then in 2013 to survive the rebellion. And they succeeded. And in 2018, they won against the rebels, and all the rebels were kind of expelled to one area in Syria, in the north, not far from the border with Turkey. And there they were preparing for the time that they will be capable of launching a new rebellion, while Turkey was assisting and equipping them and training them, etc. When they saw that their main enemy, that is actually the most loyal militia to Iran, and the previous government was partner allied with Iran. It was not dominated by Iran, but it was allied with Iran completely, or dependent on Iran. When they saw that Hezbollah became weak, this was the right timing for them, and they decided to launch a new rebellion, and they got within a few days to Damascus. And the Syrian army completely collapsed. It was not loyal to Assad. The person who is leading Syria today, the new president who took over, was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. He is responsible for the killing of many civilians in Syria. The fact that he is wearing a tie doesn't make him a Western democratic leader. He is not going to be a Western democratic leader. He is an Islamic leader. We shouldn't forget that. And what happened in Syria a few weeks ago, that this is what everybody heard about, is that he said clearly that he wants to create a state, that he wants to disarm all militias. One of the areas that he went to is the area of the Alawites, which is a small religious sect that is affiliated with the Muslim Shiites, that is the previous government, the previous regime, Assad is one of them, is an Alawite. And the people of the new leader went to this area on the seashore and massacred the Alawites, a few thousand of them. We don't know exactly, as I've said, the numbers between 1,000 to 6,000, 7,000, I don't know. But there are evidence that they massacred. They were not only fighting against those who were armed, they were also massacring women and children. But again, I don't understand why everybody is surprised. It's a leader of Al-Qaeda that became president. He was getting killed, and his supporters and the people of Syria were getting killed by the previous government in massive amounts. So now it's time to revenge. Again, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to explain it. That's the rules of the Middle East here.
How does this affect Israel, the security situation there?
On the one hand, one problem is solved. Like, he doesn't enable Hezbollah to bring munition into Lebanon. So they have to find new ways to do it. It will take them time. It is putting a lot of difficulties on the recovery process of Hezbollah. I'm not saying that it's 100% blocked, but it's very good development. On the other hand, when he will be capable of launching an attack against Israel, he will do that. And our mission today is to make sure that he will not be capable ever, because we learned that we cannot predict the intentions of our enemies. And that's why we should deal with the capabilities of our enemies. And we should make sure that our enemies don't have capabilities that can deeply threaten us. That's the overall idea of the Israeli policy in Syria. What we are doing is, first, we are attacking any strategic military capability. At the first few days, it was a massive attack against all the Syrian army before it will fall into the hand, or while it is falling into the hands of the new leadership. Today, these are attacks to make sure that also Turkey is not basing strategic military presence in Syria, because our feeling is that Turkey is trying to replace Iran. Now, for Westerns, it sounds like a positive development, but it's not a positive development, since the leader of Turkey, Erdogan, is an organ of the Muslim Brotherhood. He never hid that. And in the past few weeks, he even expressed his support to the extinction of the state of Israel. And so we learned that if those leaders are saying something, they probably believe in it. And our mission is to make sure that they are incapable of doing it. And that's what Israel is doing now. There are IDF soldiers' presence in Syria, in the areas next to the border, again, to create a buffer zone. It was supposed to be a buffer zone due to UN agreements since 1974. But it was not a buffer zone. Everybody were armed there. And eventually we went in to disarm the area, because nobody else is doing that.
We're going in towards a landing of the conversation here, but I want to ask you about the latest development with the U.S. and with Netanyahu as it relates to Iran, and how Trump has talked about the ultimatum towards Iran with the nuclear weapons and the possibility of bombing in Iran. How do you analyze that situation?
First, of course, we cannot afford or compromise on a situation that Iran will become nuclear. After everything I've just said, imagine that we had this war while Iran is nuclear. How do you defend the very existence of the state of Israel while Iran is nuclear? If you don't understand what I'm saying, all you have to do is from Norway to look east to Ukraine, and then you understand, right? Because whenever somebody talked about something to defend Ukraine, Putin said, I'm raising the alert, I'm on the nuclear arsenal. And that's it. It will be exactly the same here. We will not be able to defend ourselves if Iran will become nuclear. This is a radical ideology that wants to extend the state of Israel. So that's one thing. Now, the question is how to do it. Iran is a piece of art with negotiations that will last forever. That's what, by the way, it's the same with Hamas and the hostages. The basic interest is to have the negotiations forever while the hostages are still there, that's in Gaza, or the nuclear process is promoting and advancing as we speak. Yeah, there are negotiations, but meanwhile, they are doing whatever they are doing. That's the problem. Iran will tell Trump, yes, but we'll think about it. Let's see, maybe this, maybe that. And this is how they played with the European for 25 years. Now, I don't accept all these who said that Trump is the one who canceled the deal, because those who are saying that don't understand the Iranians for two reasons, I will say. One is because maybe the Iranians wanted to keep the deal. Yeah. But for a temporary time, in a sense that the capability to monitor what they are doing, where they are doing, almost was very limited, as you know, by the deal. And at the same time, they said, okay, we have kind of a truce, a recess. We're developing the nuclear program, but at the same time, they developed the missile program. And they developed the proxy strategy all over the Middle East. All of that happened after the nuclear deal. So we should understand that. We should look at that. And another thing is that those who truly looked at what the supreme leader of Iran said after the previous deal, he talked in Persian. And in Persian, he said that if not all the sanctions will be canceled against Iran, meaning including the sanctions because of human rights, and including the sanctions because of supporting terror, and including the sanctions because of the missiles program, if all the sanctions will be canceled, Iran will keep the deal. But if only part of the sanctions will be canceled, Iran will consider the deal as canceled. He said that in Persian, and we tend to ignore it because they signed the deal. This was the reality back then. And they want to gain the same thing now. They want to have 25 years of negotiations and maybe then a deal that doesn't close all the details and end up with a nuclear weapon. And that's why I don't see too many options here. I'm sorry that I'm saying that. Again, for us, for Israelis, the scenario of attacking in Iran is a catastrophe scenario. We avoided from doing that, and we had huge debates in our leadership about that in the past 25 years. And we tried to do the best we can in order not to get to this situation. With various ways, by the way, and not only airstrikes. If we'll have no alternative, it will happen. But unfortunately, I don't understand why it should happen by Israel. And nuclear Iran is a risk is dangerous to all the countries, the Western countries. Norway, Israel, United States, France, I don't know. All those who believe in freedom should participate in the attack against the nuclear facilities in Iran, not just Israel.
Sarit Zehavi, thank you so much for your time and for being on my podcast today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your work.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Thank you.